And Janet joins us now, along with Poltergeist expert and investigator Guy Lyon Playfair and sceptic and author Deborah Hyde. And welcome, everyone. Thank you. Now, I know, Janet, you don't do very many interviews on this subject. You've sort of put that behind you now. So thank you very much indeed for coming today to take part in this and reliving this extraordinary time of your life. So your mum is Peggy, a single mum, and lived at 284 Green Street. This is the late 1970s, and you've got Margaret, who was 12 at the time, and then there was you, 11, and then there was Johnny, who's 10, and Billy, who was 7. So what was the first time something strange happened in this house?
Well, me and my brother, we were settling down to bed one evening, and we could hear this shuffling noise, and Mum coming because she could hear us shouting and screaming, and we said that the chest of drawers was moving towards the bedroom door. So she said, "Oh, don't be silly," but she see it move for herself, and then at one point she couldn't push it back, and then she got quite upset and said, "Right, if we run downstairs."
Well, you went to get a neighbour, didn't you?
That's right. Yes.
Vic Nottingham was the neighbour who was a builder.
That's right.
And he came in, and it scared him so much that he scarpered. And then you called in the police, and we've got WPC Caroline Heaps saw a chair move. She said at the time a large armchair moved unassisted 4 feet across the floor. This is the police. Eventually the officers left, telling you that the incidents were not a police matter and you couldn't find anyone breaking the law. What they were doing, it was these events, whatever they were frightening you terribly, because they progressed and got worse and worse. So what else happened? What else do you remember of that time?
Furniture turning over, cups filled with water, fires igniting on oven gloves, and matches where part of the box or the oven glove would burn but it would go out. Voices, levitation, and at one point, the most frightening thing was when a curtain wrapped itself around my neck next to my bed. So
it felt, for you, as an 11-year-old, this felt malevolent. It felt very unfriendly.
It did, yeah. I mean, there was times when it was fascinating to see, but when it was happening to you, like the levitation, the voices...
Well, we've got a picture of here of taken by a newspaper photographer, and this is of you sort of flying through the air. And at the time, people were saying, "Well, you've just jumped off the bed," but you say that's not the case. You didn't just jump off the bed.
No.
What happened? What were the circumstances surrounding that photo?
Well, I was in bed, and it was like I felt cold hands, and there was like a force that sort of pulled me out of bed. And sometimes I'd be pulled to my bedroom door, sometimes I'd be pulled up into the air. How
come the newspaper journalist was taking a picture of you whilst you were in your bed? Did you just fly? He happened to be there at the time?
No, he didn't. He wasn't there at the time. No, it was the camera was on continuous drive.
I see. So it was recording all the time.
Yes.
And that was. I see.
Yeah.
Guy, you were brought in. You were an investigator and a writer, and initially you didn't really want to get involved with this.
No, I didn't at all.
What made you get involved?
Well, hearing Maurice Gross on the lunchtime news on Sunday, he'd just been spending the night there with a BBC reporter, and I realised that it was a big story and it wouldn't hang around and wait for me, so I just went straight off.
Now, are you the sort of person who believes in the supernatural and poltergeist?
Well, hang on, I mean, it's not supernatural. If it takes place in nature, it's natural.
Yeah.
It's just not understood. It's what some people call paranormal, which I try to avoid. But, yes, I'm as a member of the Society for Psychical Research. This is what we do. And nobody else is prepared to do it. I mean, that's why after Janet's family had called everybody else, police and the local priest and so on, they ended up calling the SPR, and we were the only people who would be able to do anything useful for them.
What did you witness?
Oh dear, do I have all day? Well, I think the most clearest memory I have is exactly what you just described. The woman police constable saw this heavy chair sliding along the floor, and then flipping over backwards just after Janice had got out of it. And that was right in front of my nose in a brightly daylight. And then she goes into the kitchen. She goes through the door. There's a tremendous crash as the table goes over when she was nowhere near it. So that was two things at once, out of about 1,000, I should think, altogether. It gives you some idea of what life was like.
Well, let's talk about Bill Wilkins, the voice of Bill Wilkins. And this is, you say, this is a voice that came out of your mouth. It felt like it was coming from behind you.
Yeah.
A very gruff voice, and which you found out that it actually there was someone here. At one point the voice said, "Just before I died, I went blind and then had a hemorrhage and fell asleep and died in the chair in the corner downstairs." And Bill Wilkins' son, Terry, confirmed that this is in fact how his father had died.
Yes.
Many people said, you know, that they couldn't understand how you could sustain this voice, which was very raspy, without it actually hurting your throat. Were you aware that when it happened, that these words were coming out of your mouth uncontrolled or controlled by you?
Uncontrolled. It wasn't controlled by me, I wouldn't say so.
Could you hear them at the time, or were
Yes,
you
I could hear
knew
them,
it was happening?
yes. I could hear them, but it just didn't feel like it. It felt like it was behind me, not within me. And at one point, Maurice Gross taped my mouth up, and he filled my mouth with water, and it still spoke.
So it came out even though you got a mouthful of water.
Yes.
You heard these voices,
Yes, indeed.
which sound terrifying.
Well, they terrified the speech therapist we brought in. She was totally freaked out and refused to be interviewed. She just ran out of the room. So, I mean, there's a professional opinion for you. And if she couldn't take it, then we did establish that it was produced by the false vocal folds, which you use for these sort of growly commercials. You can't keep that up for very long without getting a severely sore throat. And Janny could go on for hours and not get a sore throat, so how do you account for that?
So, Deborah, for reasons of balance, obviously you are a sceptic, and you don't believe any of this.
No, I'm afraid I don't really, on balance. I think historically there have been enough clear hoaxes, the Fox sisters in Hydesville in 1848 and the Amityville Horror. But even where you're not taking into account hoaxes, human beings are remarkably bad at remembering things accurately and seeing things accurately. We see things that aren't there, we don't see things that are there, and we misinterpret things that are there, especially if we're distressed or there's ambiguous information. It's very easy to impose what's called top-down processing. That's the image, the ideas you already have about the world get imposed onto the world and the things that you're seeing.
It's quite compelling, though, isn't it? If you've got police officers or speech therapists, all professional people who seem to have been deeply involved.
It is, and
affected.
it's a fascinating story, and that's why people remember this side of it rather than all the people at the time who disagreed. The journalist at the time, Doug Benz, and the photographer, Graham Morris, had their issues with it. Mary Rose Barrington from the SPR had their issues with it. There was a subsequent study by the SPR that concluded that the girls were faking it. So
No,
I think that
that's wrong. That did not conclude that.
they saw the girls bending spoons and they thought that some of the girls...
misinterpretation. Mary Rose Barrington did a very thorough and fair investigation. She concluded at the end that a great deal of the case was absolutely genuine.
I'm sure it's very difficult to tell from this. It's very difficult to get anything under controlled conditions. As soon as you do, it all disappears. That definitely happens. But looking back on it in history now, it's very difficult to say this happened, that happened exactly. What we do know is this stuff isn't replicable under controlled conditions for the most part, that people in the SPR had issues, that other people had issues, but that we remember this story because it's the best one.
Well, hang on. I mean, my tape recorder was on practically all the time, and you can't accuse tape recorders of having a false memory, or are you suggesting all the tapes have been faked?
No, not at all. I do know. Now, who was it that said that the girls were being caught tampering with the tape recorder and damaging it? Was it?
No, they
came in later.
No, that's completely wrong. I mean, that was a separate incident where we were trying to record with a videotape to try and get some action in the bedroom.
I think the thing is, though, that I feel sorry for the girls, really, because I think they must have been under a tremendous amount of pressure after a while to come up with something, you know,
come
whether
up
it
with
was there or
something. I
not.
don't think so. You wasn't there, love. You don't know. You
No,
don't
but-
know what I went through or
No.
how I feel today.
No, I'm sure I don't know how you feel today.
It will always
but
be with me in here.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I just know that human beings do misinterpret things all the time.
Well, you have
It's
to
not
see these things to
unusual.
believe them, you know, and we were there and you weren't.
Exactly.
That's what it amounts to. I mean, if you think I could have been deceived by this clever little girl for 14 months...
Arthur
then I
Conan
ought to be-
Doyle was deceived by the girls who brought up the Cottingley fairies.
Well,
It's
Yes,
not-
but there
on,
were
you
so
know.
many witnesses to this case as well as...
And there were witnesses who didn't
disbelievers.
agree with this side of the story as well.
Well, we'll have to leave it there, and it is a fascinating discussion, and I thank you all very much indeed for taking part. After your mum died, Claire Bennett and her 4 sons moved into the house. She reportedly said, "I didn't see anything, but I felt uncomfortable. There was definitely some kind of presence in the house. I always felt like somebody was looking at me." She then found out about the house's history and said suddenly it all makes sense. They moved out after just 2 months. The house is currently occupied by another family who did not wish to be identified. Thank you very much indeed. It is a compelling story, whatever anyone believes, and thank you
for
very much
having
indeed for
us.
coming in. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
John Barrowman's here right after the break with Holly.